Super Smash Bros. Melee and I have a troubled history. For the longest time, I thought that Melee was a bad game, and by far the worst of the Smash series, a belief I held all the way up until even when Smash Ultimate came out. Which is pretty strange, because Melee was technically my childhood Smash game. Now that didn't last super long, as Brawl came out around when I was 8 or so, and I immediately gravitated toward that instead. There was so much I thought I disliked about Melee until one day it just clicked. This game is what I like to refer to as my gaming renaissance. There was just so much I didn't understand about it until I actually tried to learn. I think in hindsight, all of my issues can be summed up with the phrase skill issue, because all I didn't like was that the characters were super fast and way heavier than any other Smash game. So I gravitated more towards Brawl, mostly due to its floatier, slower paced nature that fit my not yet developed 8-year-old gaming skills. So, typically, whenever I did actually play Melee when I was younger, it was usually relegated to playing super sudden death matches with all the bomb items turned on for a fun party game instead. But over the past few years, I have delved into a particular side of Melee that even Nintendo itself fears.
Happy feet, wombo combo. That ain't Falco. That ain't Falco. Oh, 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 Where you at? Oh, oh my God. Wombo combo.
That's right, we're gonna jump right into the black sheep of the competitive video game world. I say this because while most developers, especially in the FPS field, try to nurture their competitive scene to drive engagement toward the game, Nintendo is the exact opposite with Melee. For one reason or another, Nintendo has tried everything in their power to shut down competitive Melee for decades now, but much like the humble cockroach, Melee players live on despite the constant assassination attempts. I bring all this up to say that this scene was the gateway to rethinking my stance on Melee. In specific, I started to consume a lot of Hungrybox content, and I would catch a tournament every now and then. Through this and learning about the history of the scene, I started to learn how this over 20-year-old game was being pushed to its limits and innovated even still to this day. I'm not here to give you a scientific breakdown on stuff like wave dashing and L canceling, but stuff like that is what amazes me about the dedication of top players to do everything they possibly can with every mechanic available in the game's code, intentional or not. What really caught my eye is the sense of flow that combos have to them that not even other Smash Bros. Games have, and while I'm certainly still no expert, I like to think that I've definitely improved at the game, which has helped me gain a brand new appreciation of Melee and how it moves. That may have been a bit of a long tangent, but I think it's an absolutely pivotal catalyst in my personal journey to loving Melee. Without further ado, let's take a look and see what there is to love here. I'm sure that most people watching this video have played a Smash Bros. Game before, but in case you haven't, I'll give you a brief rundown of the gameplay. Smash is what's known as a platform fighting game, meaning that it focuses on fighting on different levels and positioning a lot more than standard fighting games like Street Fighter or Tekken. Another key difference is that instead of each character having a health bar, they instead have a damage percentage. Each time a character is hit, this number will increase, and the knockback received by hit will also increase, with the goal of the fights being to knock your opponent so far off screen that they reach the kill box on the edge known as the blast zone. Matches generally consist of 2 to 4 players or CPUs duking it out with a variety of rules. The most common rule set you'll see is a stock match, where each player has X amount of lives, and once someone runs out of lives, the match is over. Alternatively, you can play with a timer and score method, or a stamina method where the percentage decreases until the loser hits 0. And finally, a coin mode that I honestly have no idea how it works, but you hit people and grab coins, most at the end wins. There are also tons of items in the game that can be used to spice up the experience, such as swords, guns, fire flowers, pokeballs, and even bombs. Each character generally has their own unique movesets, weights that determine knockback, and speeds. Moves can be used in a variety of ways, but will all funnel through one of the 2 attack buttons, either A for regular attack or B for a special attack. Both of these buttons can be used without moving or combined with the D stick to result in a different move. The special moves are relatively simple, only having neutral, up, down, and sideways, but the A button is where things get complicated, as the move that comes out will be determined by what move and action you are currently making. First, you can do the same as mentioned for the B button to yield smash attacks, which are generally the hardest hitting moves that are slow to come out, but are devastating if they land. If used in the air, you instead get to use aerial moves, which can range from some of the best attacks in the game to quick hits to protect yourself while you fall. The last type of attacks are called tilts, and these can be a bit difficult to explain without actually physically holding a controller. They are generally lighter damage attacks that are extremely quick to come out and can be used as combo starters in some cases. However, using them is a little bit weird though. First, you must be on the ground or will end up being an aerial move. Second, you need to use the same inputs as smash attacks, but instead you have to input the D stick before pressing A. You can hold this input to make it easier to activate at will, but if you hold it too long without attacking, your character will start to move. Aside from direct attacks, each character also has a set of grabs used by pressing Z while nearby an opponent, with which you can either pummel with A or throw them using the D stick. Defensively, each character can use a shield with L or R while standing on the ground, which will block all incoming damage, but will deplete over time, and after taking too much damage, if the shield is broken, will cause an extremely long stun to occur. Movement-wise, you can double jump with either up on the D stick or the X and Y buttons, as well as the two types of dodges, either rolling on the ground or dodging in the air. Both dodges make you invulnerable for a second, but are consistent in how far they move, so they can be fairly easily predicted. The final thing to mention is the C stick, which can be used quickly to perform aerials and smash attacks, however you cannot use tilts with it and cannot charge out smash attacks. The roster of Smash Melee is so interesting to me, boasting 26 characters if you separate Zelda and Sheik, which was pretty robust at the time, but what really tickles my fancy is the high amount of variance between them, but also the lack of it in other times. You've got top tiers like Fox, Marth, and Jigglypuff, all with their own checks and balances to one another, the scrappy mid tiers like Peach and Yoshi that can be good in the hands of the correct pilot, and then you have Kirby and Bowser who have moves that literally do not work sometimes. So a lot of the cast feels very unique to one another, like there is an extremely tangible difference between Falco and Ness. But there are several clone characters that have nearly identical movesets to another character, just with different attributes. Characters like Dr. Mario and Ganondorf are just slower versions of Mario and Captain Falcon, and are worse off for it. The only difference between Marth and Roy is a little bit of speed and how the damage on their swords is calculated, and poor Kirby is just Jigglypuff without literally any of the tools that make her good. I just always found it interesting that they looked at Fox and Bowser side by side and said, it'll be fine. Thankfully, the stages in this game copy the good and diverse design philosophy from the character portion. You've got your plain competitively viable stages like Battlefield and Final Destination, and some goofy but pretty tame stages like Yoshi's Island and Great Bay, all the way to dynamic stages like Mute City and Brinstar Depths with Kraid in the back slapping the stage to flip it every so often. And last but not least, the 4-player dream of Hyrule Temple. This place was way too big for any type of serious match, but during sleepover nights, this place was so much fun to run around with 3 friends and destroy each other in small tunnels. Overall, Melee has not only some of the best stages in the series, but also some of the most creative as well. For a game from 2001, this game looks great. The models are super detailed and expressive, and this was even the first appearance for several characters like Yoshi and Peach on the GameCube at all, and characters like Martha and Roy having their first 3D appearance in general. Stage visual design has really been ramped up as well compared to Smash 64. Most stages in the first game were just platforms in a void with a still background image, but this time you've got plenty more dynamic stages like the aforementioned Brinstar Depths and the likes of Onet and Pokemon Stadium. The stages feel very alive this time around, like you're actually fighting through the world these levels are supposed to be inside of, and of course we had the iconic opening cinematic showing the highest quality versions of these characters we had seen at this point in time, that honestly still looks great even today. Smash Bros. Has been known for its great music since the very beginning, featuring remixes and remasters of Nintendo classics and original compositions as well, like the now iconic Melee main theme and menu song. The character sound effects in this game are also top-notch, from the to the, plus who can forget the, and of course the, all just a couple of classic lines that litter fights within this game. Much like any party game, Smash Bros. Stands on the merits of its game modes and how enjoyable of an experience they provide. Here on the main menu, we've got 4 different selections, all with their own set of sub-menus to go through. In menu order, we've got 1 player, versus, trophies, and data. But as far as talking order, I'm going to start with versus mode because that's what you came to a Smash game to play. Regular Melee mode is a vanilla mode of the game, where you just pick 2 to 4 fighters, a stage, and duke it out with whatever rules you decide. You can either grab a group of friends, or be realistic with yourself because you're watching a Doddboy video and grab a CPU who can never leave you. The CPUs can be set to any level from 1 to 9, ranging from level 1 having the same motor skills as a 4-year-old, and level 9s which will wax you unless you're fairly competent at the game or know how to manipulate their predictable AI. You can even do stuff like team battles, or change what items appear and how often. Like I mentioned earlier, there are a few different ways to keep scores, such as time, stamina, and coins, but the primary method most people use is stocks, sometimes in combination with time. Simple as that, just pick your rules and go, no special hoops to jump through. Next up is Tournament Mode, and oh man, this was my bread and butter as a kid. Tournament Mode is a bracket generation program for anywhere between 4 to 64 players that is either fully customizable in terms of seeding and what characters are present, or can be fully randomized. And the coolest part is that all 64 can even be humans, so you can hold a massive in-person tournament without the help of outside bracketing software. As a big lifelong traditional and esports fan, I've always loved game modes that feature brackets to simulate tournaments or playoff scenarios. It's always tickled my brain the right way. Last up for versus mode is actually a combination of special melee and using custom rules, because they're basically the same thing and are at their core just normal fights with added rules. Special melee are a list of preset options that you can mix and match to get a unique combination of goofy rules. For example, you can make everyone big or small, make everyone metal, fast or slow, etc. It's really just meant to be a sort of chaos mode to have fun. Custom rules are the same idea, but it's more of a debug mode where you can change the properties of the game, such as the starting damage percentage, the knockback coefficient, and even the weight of the characters. My favorite custom match is to change the starting starting damage percentage to 300, change to mini-sized fighters, and have only bomb-type items spawn and turn into 99 stocks. Doing this with 4 Luigis will always make me laugh with their high-pitched cacklings. Next, let's dive into Melee's surprisingly robust single-player selections for when you're feeling like something just a bit different. There are 4 main single-player modes: Adventure, Classic, All-Star, and Event mode. The first 3 all have 5 difficulty settings ranging from very easy to very hard that change the level of the CPUs you face, and also feature the options to start with 1 to 5 stocks to add another layer of difficulty if you so desire. One annoying thing I have to mention is that in any of the single-player minigame modes, you cannot use the C-stick for attacks, but instead it controls the camera for some reason. It's super annoying and makes aerials way more inconvenient to do. Up first is Melee's marquee single-player Adventure mode. This is the one and only instance of this game mode being replaced in the future by things like Subspace Emissary and World of Light. Adventure mode features a set path of unique Nintendo-themed worlds that are brand new stages that are more like levels from their home games rather than a Smash stage. For example, the Mushroom Kingdom level involves getting to the goal line at the end, the Zelda stage involves searching for the real Triforce, and the Metroid stage has you climbing vertically to escape as the planet begins to explode, similar to the end of most Metroid games. Each character goes through the same stages, but there are some random elements like the Triforce location that keep things relatively fresh on subsequent playthroughs. At the end, you will eventually be face to face with Bowser in a 1v1 as the final boss. However, if you are on normal difficulty or higher and clear the adventure in 18 total minutes, Bowser will respawn in his new Smash original monstrous form, Giga Bowser. Our second offering is Classic mode, and that describes it well because this is Smash's premier single player mode that has been around since the very beginning. Classic mode consists of 8 consecutive fights broken up by a few minigames, which all culminates in a fight with the series' staple villain, Master Hand. And if you manage to make it to the end without losing a stock and take out half of Master Hand's health, you will get to fight a 1v2 as Crazy Hand swoops down on the other side of Final Destination, which this isn't too bad as you do get healed in between every fight. I've always loved these fights with Master Hand for not only being different from a traditional Smash battle, but also for the lore implications of the characters being toys that are played with by a kid using his hands to make his own characters. The fights preceding can range from simple 1v1s and 2v2s to 3v1s against giant foes and more. They're the same fights every time you play the mode, but each character has their own set of fights to go through, so that helps it from getting too stale. And in between the fights you get to play 3 minigames: Break the Targets, Race to the Finish, and Trophy Tussle. Race to the Finish is as it sounds. It's a straight obstacle course where you try to reach the furthest possible exit door before time runs out, and Trophy Tussle involves attempting to knock trophies into the funnel in the center. Break the Targets is the most fleshed out minigame, so it'll get its own part later, but effectively you run around an obstacle course trying to break all the targets in one go. And also kind of a weird sentence to say, but the credits are super cool too. Instead of a standard text scroll, it's a shooter minigame where you try to aim and shoot the credit names and go for a high score, and if you don't feel like doing that, you can always just press start to fast forward. Another one of Smash's now iconic modes got its debut here in the second game of the series. All-Star mode is incredibly simple. You fight through a gauntlet of every fighter in the game with breaks in between. At first you only fight a single fighter, then eventually 2 and 3 before getting a break. The trick is your damage is not reset in between rounds, but instead can only be replenished by using the 3 hearts found in the rest area, but once you're out of hearts, that's all you get. The order of the fighters is completely random except for Mr. Game & Watch, who will always be the last fight and will always be a group of 25 weak versions of him. Another new Melee debut is Event mode, a set of 51 battles each with their own special requirements to win. These can range from specific objectives like protecting a teammate Princess Peach to all-out free-for-all slobber knockers. The coup de grace is of course Mission 51, which is a 2-stock 3v1 with any character of your choosing against Ganondorf, Mewtwo, and Giga Bowser. But unfortunately some of the difficulty comes from the fact you can't use the C-stick, as it controls the camera for some reason in this mode as well. Up next are technically more single-player modes, but rather than a full, robust experience, they're just the short and sweet minigames within Stadium mode. Here we have the previously mentioned Break the Targets, which is effectively just an obstacle course where you need to hit all the targets with any attack in a single go. But the cool part of this mode is that each character has their own uniquely designed course that is themed around their moveset. For example, Jigglypuff has a bunch of mid-level, small openings that pair well with their floatiness. It seems like the design philosophy of these stages was to teach the player how to maximize the character's movements through various move combos, and I think that's really cool. The next mode, Home Run Derby, is incredibly simple. Your goal is just to hit the sandbag as far as possible. To do so, you are given a home run bat item and 10 seconds to rack up as much damage as possible to maximize the distance. This can be tricky to do optimally because, again, you cannot use the C-stick for some reason, and even if you do big damage, it can be hard to go back and grab the bat in time to get a swing off. It's nothing too complex, but definitely good fun. Multiman Melee is up next, and it's probably by far the mode I've spent the least amount of time playing. The concept is various different types of battles versus the wireframe fighters, which are just weaker, non-textured versions of other fighters. There are 4 different types of Triple M fights: 3 and 15-minute time survival challenges, 10 and 100-man endurance battles, endless melee, and finally cruel melee, with more difficult enemies and no items. I've never really been a fan of these. They're just kind of boring and don't really feel rewarding to do, as they don't really get you much, and it's just trying to not get stun-locked by the 4 opponents you're perpetually fighting. But my favorite way to deal with this mode is just to use DK's ground slap move that insta-kills them. The final game mode, if you can call it that, is Training Mode. It's just your typical fighting game mode to practice moves and combos. You can spawn in fighters and items, modify starting damage and positions, and even change the AI behavior of the CPU. Nothing special by any means, but it's still neat if you want to practice. Earlier I mentioned the Trophy Tussle minigame with the goal of knocking the trophies into the center, but this isn't just for fun because you're actually able to see these trophies. In the gallery you can take a close look at dozens of standee figurines of characters and items from the history of the fighters and Nintendo in general, and you can spread them all out on this table for a full shot. Each statue features a brand new model or sprite for the character and a small blurb about who/what they are and even notes their game of origin. You can get trophies through 4 different ways. First, you can get them at random via the aforementioned minigame, random spawns in one-player modes, and by gambling in the slot machine using the coins earned through the single-player modes. There are some trophies that can only be obtained through static means, like beating a specific game mode in certain conditions, which includes my personal favorite trophies, being the trio of different posed statues each character gets for clearing the Adventure, Classic, and All-Star game modes. These use the character's smash designs, and to me feel like a cool reward just for beating the game. I've always loved these trophies. It's always such a joy to see when the developers get to flex their creative muscles every once in a while. The final menu option we have is the data menu, and while there is no game to be had here, it's still a joy for stat nerds like myself. It's just a spreadsheet with cool graphics that shows your stats like KOs, wins, etc. with each individual character. And again, it's just something I like to nerd out about, but I'm sure you'll barely ever come here. Before, I had said that competitive melee is what has kept this game alive for this long, which is true, but even that almost left us. Not sure if you guys remember about 5.5 years ago when a quirky little disease showed up on the block, and yeah, a lot of people died or whatever, but the most important side effect was that in-person melee tournaments could no longer be played, meaning a 20-year-old game like Melee without a dedicated online service practically couldn't be played. That is until a few months later when a beautiful person by the name of Fizzy and their team released something known as Slippi. Named after the frog from Star Fox, Slippi is a modified version of the Dolphin emulator's netplay feature that typically allows for online play between emulator users. Given that Slippi was solely dedicated to playing only Melee, the dev team was able to optimize the client to provide near seamless online play, an updated UI, and even a ranked ladder. It's without a doubt the reason why competitive Melee, and by extension the player base, survived through the pandemic. Several tournaments were held through it, top players used it to practice with one another, and even casual folk like myself preferred because it also looks and runs so much better than the original. Plus, one of my favorite perks is that being that it's emulator based, you can edit the character's costumes using third-party software. So you can end up with stuff like Garfield Fox, Batman Captain Falcon, the Slice Climbers, Leonardo Chic, Obamness, and of course, HBox Puff. Slippi is absolutely the definitive way to play Melee, especially in any sort of online multiplayer context and even for some ways single player as well. In the not-so-distant past, I used to refer to Melee as the bad one, and Smash 4 as the best one. And while that opinion aged worse than milk on an Alabama sidewalk in June, I don't necessarily blame myself for having it. I think I was quite simply just too young to enjoy the finer points of the game. And then here comes Brawl with a girthy single-player mode and slower matches that just scratch my brain a bit better. But I couldn't be more glad to say that I've grown up now, and with it my appreciation for the unicorn of a game that Melee is. Boasting the best versus mode experience in the series, and a unique and robust but albeit not perfect single-player mode as well, it all modes together to create something truly special. And even though there's absolutely zero chance of this game ever being re-released, I think that it really doesn't need it. If anyone ever tried to remake it, there's no way that they would be able to capture the distinct feel and jank that makes Melee, well, Melee. There's still new tech being discovered even as this game has already turned 24 years old, which is just so emblematic of Melee as a whole. I think ultimately Melee needs to be left as the black sheep of the Smash franchise, just festering in its own little cavern being developed by the labbing goblins that live within. Melee may have entered itself into the gaming pantheon within my head, but I'm curious to know what others think about it. Let me know in the comments where Melee stacks up against the rest of the Smash Bros. Series in your mind. And if you made it all the way here, you might as well smash that like and subscribe button, see what I did there. If you do, just know it'll put a dumb little grin on my face. And thank you so much as always for watching, and I hope you have a great day.